Now, Timothy, this has just been very elucidating, I think. Now, you and I had the idea we've just really brought this into, because what I wanted to do is show people like the big picture of what we're talking about here. This 18-year evolutionary arc of the larger concentric circle represented by the solar eclipses moving through the houses of the personal zodiac. Now, I would love, and this is depending on your time, how much we want to roll with here. This has already been a long video, but I'm okay with it because this is feeling like a juicy conversation that we're having. I'm thinking of moving towards, for everyone's sake, showing my personal chart, showing my chart and the transit of the solar eclipse that happened in 2017. We can talk a little bit about it. Then we can show how the next solar eclipse was in Cancer in my 12th house. Then the next one was in Gemini in my 11th house. And we could talk a little bit about how you as an evolutionary astrologer would apply your approach to helping a client integrate that narrative. I'm thinking of moving in that direction. I just wanted to ask you if you wanted to add anything to what we've been talking about.
I think that would be awesome.
Cool.
And thank you for volunteering your chart because, yeah, I'd love to demonstrate my approach. And I think it's the best way to really learn astrology, to see it through a lived experience. So
to see it good. Fleshed out. Okay, my friends. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen here. And now we can see that we are looking at a transit chart. Now I'm going to just bring this back to the point that we were talking about, which was about 2017. Let's say 6 months ahead. So this is August of 2017. It was right around here. Maybe we'll bring it up 1 week. We can see the sun. Let's see. I had the exact date was August 21st. So it's right around here. We can see after 1 day, the moon and the sun are conjunct at the end of Leo, along with that north node. And this is happening, as for everybody watching, the outer circle here, these orange glyphs are the transiting planets. And the inner chart, which we see here is Leo. The inner chart is my personal natal chart. So we can see at this point in August of 2017 that the solar eclipse was happening right at the end of the sign of Leo. And this is my first house. And this is when I got all kinds of nutty. To give a little bit of background here, I was really at this point, as a Vedic astrologer, I always correlated the pain I was experiencing to this period to the fact that Saturn was transiting right over my natal moon. And as you mentioned, Timothy, this is certainly a confluence situation where there's two things, happening here. I always would have just correlated this to Sati Sati, which is the Vedic term for Saturn transiting the moon. But when I was talking with you, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that in August, this is when, Sati Sati for me was happening all year. And I was working a difficult construction job that was grinding my guts into the dust, getting no sleep, waking up and going and jamming with a band, which they're all nice guys. They're good guys. This is my own personal trip that caused I was in a victimization phase. I felt like I wasn't strong enough to write songs in the band, to contribute to the band in the way that I would really like to. And I was chipping all my time into this band and then going to this construction job and grinding my guts out there. And neither of these felt like I was the initiator. I just felt like I was just being dragged around by these other people who were good to go in their lives. My boss in my construction thing was ordering me around to do this stuff. I felt very victimized, like I was not initiating the direction or the willfulness in my life. It got to a point where I was kind of like somewhat like suicidal. I was at least having suicidal thoughts. It did get to this point at this period. And this is part of the reason why I was blessed to have my friend Janine offer me to she was going to Peru. She wanted to go to Peru and do ayahuasca. And me being the type of person who would be into that, I almost thought like it would be a waste of time because I've got all these other things that I'm being yanked around by. But I said, screw it. I need to go and have this flushing experience. And it was around the time, like right around here, I think in August, that I got on the plane and went to Peru for a month and had a life-changing experience. So this is me giving my short thrift to this period, Timothy. You and I talked a little bit about things that you saw in this period. Would you like to elucidate what you think of the connections that you see during this period?
For sure. This is actually my favorite thing. And something I offer through the community is once a month I do a Q&A. And just like this, I have it structured so people share what's going on in their life. We pull up their chart, their transits, and look at it as a group. And it's a really awesome way to just, because what we're going to talk about here and why I love to do this is you just cannot make this shit up.
Yeah, ain't it the truth?
Astrology is so clear. It's so clear. There is no confirmation bias or any of this bullshit. It is what you see is what you get. There is no changing it.
Especially for the date.
It's so clear.
To the date.
Oh, yeah.
Like I got my plane ticket stub for like this week of August is when I went. So it blows my mind.
Yeah. And you know, Chiron is Chiron and 12th house is 12th house and Leo is Leo. I mean, this is reflecting the experience that you're sharing here. So yeah, I do this Q&A once a month and I just rapid fire. I'll do several dozen readings in a row over the course of a few hours. And it's just so exciting to see and to learn astrology and also to have the support to be able to support each other in our experience. So to come to your example here, first of all, I actually want to clarify because I don't use these charts.
Okay.
It looks to me like the solar eclipse is in your 12th because it looks like your ascendant's at 12.
Yep.
And the eclipse is at 10. Am I reading that right?
I think it might be backwards from what you're thinking, because it seems to me that this, for example, I'm showing Mars, the North Node, and the Moon. This is happening in the later degrees of Leo, if I'm reading it correctly.
Okay. So it is the first house.
Yeah, I would still say that it is happening in the latter degrees of Leo and probably more of my first house, I would say.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Is it conjunct Chiron? Because there's so much of your experience that is reflecting what we see between that Chiron. And I think it's Chiron opposite to Saturn.
Yeah, I would say that's correct. There is a Chiron Saturn opposition within 10 degrees of orb.
Okay, good. So we definitely want to read that then. And this is what is reflected in your experience.
I think so too.
The Chiron Saturn opposition is this experience of, your challenge with the band, specifically Chiron in Leo, and wherever Chiron is in our chart, it's such an amazing, important planet to look at because, especially if we're using astrology as a healing modality, because Chiron is where we first have experience of woundedness that initiates our journey of healing, that brings us full circles into being gifted healers ourselves. Certainly. So what Carl Jung said about the wounded healers, and he coined the term, is that it's the wounded healers that are the true healers. And it is via our experience of pain and woundedness that we initiate our heart to compassion. So Chiron really is the vehicle into some of our greatest healing gifts. When Chiron is in the sign of Leo, there tends to be early experiences of woundedness around spontaneous self-expression, creativity, being seen, sharing your own creative or artistic gifts. Now, the Saturn in Aquarius opposite to that Chiron is where there can be early experiences via that Saturn conditioning, authorities, father figure that puts pressure on that Chiron in Leo. It says, well, there's particular standards,
Right.
and you've got to achieve this, or, it's got to make sense. And, Chiron and Leo is like, hey, you're being too childish. You got to grow up. What are you just, doing a job that's for kids? That's not what adults do. That's going to be a Saturn Chiron opposition. I got one of those myself. So it's familiar area.
Wonderful. I appreciate you elucidating it for me, because you've been studying it then, obviously.
Oh yeah. Chiron is so important. And Chiron is an important planet in your chart too, by the way.
Thank you. Because I've been learning this.
In EA, we look to the planetary ruler of the South Node has been especially cultivated, experienced, developed in past lives. So your South Node in Sagittarius is an important signature in your chart. This would describe a naturally empathic intuition, as well as so many creative gifts with that South Node in the 12th that you're bringing in. But that moon in Sag being trine to your Chiron in Leo would be a signature that says...
Sorry, just to for me to make the connection here. So you said so I've got the South Node in Cancer, and so Cancer rules the moon. So the moon is in Sagittarius. I just needed to make that correlation to what you're saying there. The moon is my South Node ruler in Sagittarius. Gotcha. I just wanted to make sure I was following you there.
Yep. And this is an important placement, as the planetary ruler of the South Node is, again, the egoic construct that's been formed, experiences that we've had in the past, what we're bringing in. So the planetary ruler of the South Node is a very defining part of the personality. And again, in your chart, this would be certainly a signature for an empathic, intuitive faculty. The trine between Chiron and that moon further says you've been a healer. There is a sensitivity via that intuition.
Wow.
That's very tuned into Chiron and Leo is the ability to heal others, to be confident in their own self-expression.
Wonderful.
And having spoken to you just for a few moments, I can tell that this is one of the defining gifts that you bring into this life, is you make people feel safe, Cancer, warm, welcome, and invited to be their individual self. Chiron and Leo, also the moon in the 5th house. And this would be something that's especially useful and needed for an astrologer, because you're validating people's individual nature.
I feel like I do it in my music and everything. It's something that I do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that would be that Chiron and Leo in the 12th house. One of my favorite examples for a Chiron and Leo is Jimi Hendrix.
Cool, dude. Gnarly. I totally see that.
For sure. Here we are in rock star astrology.
Wow, dude, that is so cool, Timothy. I appreciate the connections you're making.
It would be a real truth, is that your music would carry a healing vibration, and that what you're radiating from your heart via the function of Leo and the sun would actually carry a vibration that touches the hearts and uplifts and inspires other souls. That is the potential that comes out of the healing journey of Chiron and Leo, through which you are actually having an initiation on the solar eclipse. First of all, you're having the very stereotypical Chiron experience of purging. This is what Chiron does. When you follow Chiron in transit, this is the effect of a Chiron transit, is Chiron transits are not normally comfortable. I correlate them to time periods that are like being on an operation table. Where I give the example of, it's like when we go to a cheap restaurant and get food poisoning and spend the whole evening puking into the toilet. That's Chiron. But what Chiron does is remove the toxins, fears, inadequacies from our system. And then that's where we end up discovering gifts and healing modalities. So Chiron and Leo will have those types of wounds and insecurities. There's a wound in Leo nature. Like a lack of confidence to do your thing, go to the beat of your own drum spontaneously and instinctively, especially with that Chiron also on the ascendant.
I think
so. Lo and behold,
go ahead. But what I was going to say
is that Saturn in Aquarius again is the social pressure being put on that instinctual individual expression, and that would be illuminated with that solar eclipse also opposite to Saturn, conjunct that Chiron.
Wow.
And the job stuff too.
No kidding. Like
Saturn.
What I wanted to say is that, to correlate what you're saying, I think that whenever I'm very new to Chiron because I've spent 4 years in Vedic astrology, and they don't consider the asteroids or the outer planets, at least not in traditional Vedic astrology. There's plenty new modern tropical Vedic astrologers who do, but it's an integration going on. And one of the words that I've been using to convey my personal experience of Chiron in Leo is like a small man syndrome. Is
Yes.
like I had to show everybody, like, and it was in a Saturnian way, like, I can get through this. And this is what I was experiencing at this time. Like, I don't need help. I just need to get through this hard, difficult moment. And it was almost like I pushed myself in this way to the point where I had to almost like pop. Could have popped, might not be here, but I didn't. Instead, I held it down long enough to go to Peru, and then ayahuasca forced me into a space of reception where it's like you can't just try and get through this all yourself. I ended up doing ayahuasca and talking with a group of people about this painful stuff, which is that I don't feel like I'm good enough. I don't feel like I'm enough. I feel like everybody sees the flash and glamour in me, but internally, I feel like I'm actually a piece of crap. And it was in this period that I talked with others about this experience and came to find that it didn't define me as much as I thought it did. It wasn't something that I couldn't touch. So that it was the small man syndrome that I wanted to correlate with that Chiron in Leo.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, when it turns into a Jimi Hendrix is when there's simply a spontaneous releasing of self-expression without thinking twice about it, because that is the high potential of Leo. But that's obviously going to be the healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that Saturn Chiron signature, I could also see being one of performance pressure. There being high standards. It's like, hey, if you're given, if you go to art school, Saturn in Aquarius, and there's these particular, ways of doing things, it's like, okay, well, then you've got to prove to your parents, your authorities, whoever paid for school, what you're capable of, what you're doing. So this can be a signature of that type of performance pressure too. And that's where the healing journey is, to really overcome whatever challenge of that Saturn in Aquarius, which is going to be this peer pressure. It's interesting how we see this reflected in Saturn in Aquarius these years, where there's so much peer pressure being put on the scientific community with COVID. And it's this peer pressure can be some of the challenges of Saturn in Aquarius. The group is thinking this way. Well, what are you doing?
Yes. And how can you
And this is where
contribute
you'd be liberating yourself, is your soul wants to be a builder of community. That's your Uranus on the North Node in Capricorn. It's like you are constructing, creating, and building a new way of being. So your job's going to be really important. That Saturn rules your North Node. And that would also be why this particular eclipse is so powerful for you. It was right on your Chiron. It's bringing up this deep healing journey, this deep purging, releasing of all these inadequacies and small person syndrome, but also, where was I just going with this?
Kind of giving me a way to share with the world how I got through those.
Your job
syndrome.
Yes, this eclipse is opposite to the ruler of your moon's North Node.
Right.
Now, in particular, when we see transits affecting the planetary rulers of the moon's nodes, as we mentioned, the moon's nodes being so important, the backbone of our soul's evolution, the tension, between the past and the future. Well, this eclipse opposite to your Saturn is going to be giving you, via an opposition, an objective seeing how your job, how that Saturn is going, and your North Node in Capricorn, as well as Pluto in the fourth house, is going to have this overall. And these are the bottom line themes in a chart. Pluto, moon's nodes, there will be an overall evolutionary intention to recognize your own capabilities, to step up in the world as an authority through self-recognition and giving yourself permission. So North Node in Capricorn, as well as Pluto in the fourth house, it's all about recognizing your capability. So you're not just doing what a Pluto in the fourth and a South Node in the Cancer would naturally do at the beginning of this life, which would be the caretaker of everybody else.
Nice.
And
Nailed it.
it would be, what do other people need me to do for them?
Wow.
As opposed to, what are you doing?
Right.
And that's where this eclipse would also be driving that necessary reflection via the opposition to look at that job, how unsatisfying it was, not honoring your soul's desires, which are reflected in that North Node Capricorn joining with Uranus and Neptune to really create really a new paradigm. That's the kind of chart that you have. That's
wow.
something I'd be very happy to reaffirm and validate for you, is that North Node with Uranus and Neptune wants to bring in a new way of living, a new way of being involved in the world and society. And what's the purpose for being a human? What does humanity mean? You know, that's a part of this Uranus Neptune conjunction, is being a seed sower for the coming world. So being a construction worker and being under the foot of these, you know, super oppressive
paradigm
chains of command, which your soul would need to necessarily experience to recognize in a North Node Capricorn, Pluto in the fourth house type of way. That if people don't know what they're doing and this isn't working for me, well, I might just have to step it up because I know what I'm doing.
Right.
That's going to be a backbone for your whole life.
So awesome, buddy. And you know, you nailed it, Timothy. I can't wait, because I know you and I mentioned that we're going to do mutual chart exchange. Yeah, and I love what you're doing with me here. So just to reiterate, if I understand,
Saturn on your moon, like you said, that Sati,
the Sati,
that's no, I mean, that's
no
all together,
picnic.
like you said.
Yeah. I love the way you put that. And I'm just correlating.
That's the South Node ruler.
Yes, right.
So you got both at the same time.
Wow, no wonder I was in such a place at that time. And I think I'm just correlating the fact that this solar eclipse was happening in my first house opposite Saturn, and Saturn is the ruler of my natal North Node. My natal North Node is in Capricorn with all these other outer planets, which means Saturn is carrying the energy of Capricorn and the North Node. And this solar eclipse was happening in my first house. It was opposite Saturn, which means that it had to come to almost a confrontation with those old Saturnian ways of industrial, big old metal boots stepping on my head, and you know, that whole experience. So I see that connection there.
And that's how we do put it all together. You know, we would also say, hey, with Saturn ruling your North Node, Saturn return was probably a very significant shift in your life. But yeah, we put it all together. And again, the rulers of the nodes are especially important. So it's saying, hey, Saturn was conjunct your South Nodal ruler, the moon at this time. You're getting an emotional gravity that's weighing on you, that's giving you the personal experience of emotional dissatisfaction with your job as the necessary experience with the North Node in Capricorn, where your soul actually wants to step up. So you can't let the world step on you. And that is oftentimes the experience earlier in life. Honestly, Pluto, fourth house, South Node in Cancer souls can be born into families that are a little bit more emotionally immature or unstable, and they become the caretakers of their parents early on in life.
Yep.
And they're master caretakers. Again, you bring a softness into this reading that is essential medicine in this time, especially. What you have is what the world needs.
Wonderful.
But there is a need to recognize that what you have is what the world needs. The world doesn't know what it needs. You have what the world needs. So that self-recognition is to go out there, create it, construct it, to build it yourself. And you would be getting an experience of peer pressure. The South Node's transiting the seventh house. It's like other people are coming up with their own opinions, and then your soul's doing the intention of the North Node in the first at this particular time, breaking away from that relationship influence, other people's ideas, saying, this is what I want to do. First house, this is what I'm going to initiate.
Wonderful. You know, around this period, there was an important thing that I needed to digest. And as I understand it, in the Vedic way, there's an old typical old Vedic saying that they use in order to help people understand the integration that goes on with Rahu and Ketu, with the North Node and the South Node. What they talk about is, people talk about how Ketu is the past and that it's something that we have to kind of let go of in order to move towards Rahu. But the important phrase that they use is, when you're washing a baby, you want to make sure that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And the experience I had at this time, especially, is that my family was operating at the emotional understanding and the civil evolutionary understanding that they could operate on. And a lot of the times they were unconsciously pulling me away from the individuality that I sought. And
it's very stereotypical.
For sure. And I didn't want to cut them out completely. So what I ended up doing was understanding, especially at a soul level, my mother is a really strong, firm influence in my life. And God bless her. She means well for me, but she gets worried. And this energy is something that I had to wield, understand with compassion that my mother is only worried about me. She'll always be worried about me, but I am not subservient to her worries and fears. And I can integrate. Thankfully, she's strong. She's a good fucking lady. And she just bore the tension of me telling her that I am going to live the life that I'm going to live, no matter what fears and worries you have. And there was a long time where she hated it and it was painful, but I led with compassion and just kept telling her, despite everything going on, I love you. I did a deep acid trip where I realized that I used to think that my mother was someone I wasn't obligated to love. She happened to be the woman whose legs I slipped through in order to be born in this world. I had a deep acid trip and I realized that she actually was in a soul contract with me, and she didn't need to, but she protected and nurtured me my whole life. And she could have ditched me at any time, but she didn't. She showed me love the whole time. And I recognized that soul connection and said that I'm going to start living my own individual life while still having compassion for this woman who cared for me in the way that she did. And now, lo and behold, I'm living as my own individual life, and my mother's still very close to me. And she gets it.
There you go.
She's
You've
learning.
done the evolutionary intentions of that North Node Capricorn,
while
Pluto
still,
in the fourth is similar, and that is going to be inspiration for any people with that signature, because it is extremely common, necessary to go through that rite of passage.
I appreciate your wisdom, Timothy. I can tell that you've been really sharpening this surgeon's knife for quite some time.
Well, thank you. This is the stuff I'm really passionate about, is because the moon's nodes are going to actually reflect the actual psychological evolutionary journey of every person. So I can see in the chart of a moon's nodes in Cancer Capricorn polarity that reparenting is more than likely going to be a very important part of this person's entire life.
Right.
Therefore, if we can just get some of this information to therapists, this is like skipping a dozen therapy sessions and getting straight to the heart of what's someone's journey of healing, and then not to just end at an astrology reading, but to actually get people the actual healing techniques to move through life. That's where I'm excited to see what astrology can become.
No kidding, Timothy. That is so wonderful. Now, in the interest of, I deeply appreciate you taking so much time and your insight into my personal chart. I feel like I could just be selfish and just get all of the reading for myself that you want to give here. But you and I will do that in our own time, Timothy. For the interest of everybody watching this video, I'm starting to think of, I was thinking of us just going from the solar eclipse in Leo in 2017 to the solar eclipse in Cancer in July of 2019, and just kind of like speculating on how this might have unfolded. I don't have any dates in my mind. Some things happened around that time. I
would suspect so.
I moved houses.
That's your nodal opposition.
Cool. So do you want to move forward and see what we can pick apart from that
Oh,
period?
that's what I moved too. How interesting. We moved during an eclipse in Cancer. Who
Aha,
could have guessed?
right. Yeah, you totally, dude. Okay, so you're with me on this. So let's move forward here. We're gonna go ahead 2 years. Now, the date that I've got here is July 3rd, around this time. And then back a few days. So it was around this time. Interestingly, this is actually also the time that I came into reception with my girlfriend at the time. So it looks to me like this would have been right around here, essentially. July 2nd, around this area. Maybe I should move it up a little bit.
I'm really confused by this chart because it says that the midheaven is in Cancer and then it's in your 12th house at the same time. What's
The
up with that? Oh,
uh
those must be the.
the transiting
Uh,
hours, the transiting houses. So okay, so for
okay, they're
uh,
moving the
yes,
outer wheel
you got it.
instead of. Okay.
The outer wheel, for example, this ascendant on the outer
Okay,
wheel,
I see.
this is simply whatever time this was. This is 12 p.m. on July 2nd, 2019. So 12
So
p.m.
the reason this is confusing is we're not seeing that eclipse, therefore, in your 12th house, or are we?
So remember, this is the inner
No, it
wheel.
is. Okay,
You
okay.
see what I mean? The inner wheel is my personal
I see what we're
houses.
saying. We're saying that this eclipse happened in your
Y-
12th house at noon. This is on the midheaven.
It
Gotcha.
well, that's right. That's right. And that's why that's exactly correct, Timothy. Now, to be honest with you, I don't even have the exact date right because it seems to me that the moon kind of went into the new moon. Uh, would you still call this almost an eclipse in since it's in Cancer? Because as we can see, we can even just move this apart by hours. The actual moon conjuncting the sun was a few degrees behind the north node in Cancer.
Oh, it's still an eclipse.
Still an eclipse. I
Yeah,
thought so.
eclipses have a pretty good orb. They're even more than 10 degrees when
Okay,
you have partial solar eclipses. Yeah.
gotcha. I thought so. So this would be a general approximation of the time, which is why, for everybody's reference, the external houses are pretty irrelevant. What we're really wanting to look at here is the sun and the moon in the north node all being conjunct in relatively conjunct in Cancer, which, as we can see in the inner wheel, is actually right on my 12th house cusp, it looks like. My 12th house cusp, according to this natal chart, is about 13 degrees of Cancer. And the north node was at about 18 degrees of Cancer. The sun and the moon were pretty much right on this nodal point, or I mean, right on my 12th house cusp when this solar eclipse occurred. Does that make sense? Is that a little bit clarifying to things happening here?
Yeah, I see. I see what's going on now.
Perfect.
Yeah, this would have been a very significant eclipse, I would suspect.
Well,
This is
I would say at this time, it's very interesting to me that I hadn't, I've always had some, let me just zero in on this Venus debilitated in Virgo here. I've always had relationships to be a part of my journey. And or wanting to be in a relationship, but for a long time I hadn't gotten in a relationship for years before this point. Before 2017, the last time I was in a relationship before this point was probably like 2013, 2014. And then for years I was just doing a lot of self-seeking. It was in 2019 that at the beginning of the year, I had met my present girlfriend, and it was in July that I started going out with her officially, just at the time that I'd moved into my new place. I was living with the girl, Janine, who I had gone out to Peru with. So me and her are both very yoga minded, psychedelic minded people. And I was coming home to this type of consciousness at this time in July of 2019. interesting to think about. So does that make sense, at least in terms of certainly the eclipse happening in Cancer, happening on the 12th house cusp? Maybe it's possible that I was integrating past life energy at some level by moving into this place that I'm presently in during this eclipse.
Certainly. And that is because of the eclipse happening during your nodal opposition. So these nodal transits are some of the most important transits. Every 18 years, again, we'll have a nodal return.
Right.
And, roughly 9 years after a nodal return, we have what is called the nodal opposition. This is when the transiting moon's north node is in conjunction to our natal moon's south node.
Right.
That's and the signature opposition of a nodal opposition is this is when the past is being brought into the present. To clearly see and understand that past, and through that understanding of the past, be able to move into the future. So nodal oppositions is when there oftentimes is a reliving, whether subtle or not, a repetition of past life experience. There is a remembering. There's very familiar experiences that can come up. And because the south node reflects the past, this can also be a potentially challenging time because we are getting to understand where we've come from. This is also a time that is very useful in understanding our own psychological makeup. What formed our consciousness in the past? What types of experiences formed that consciousness in the past? And again, we're likely reliving, so to remember, clearly identify, and then integrate where we've come from. And that, in turn, could also bring up gifts. The South Node is where we can also clearly, create this new cycle of recognizing where we've come from and bring in these past life gifts.
Totally.
But it can also be where we may have comfort zone or shadow tendencies. And again, the South Node's really going to reflect the psychological makeup of our own ego identity that's been formed out of the very particular types of past experiences that we've had. So to use your South Node in Cancer in the 12th house as an example, this would be someone who in the past really gave themselves out of a big heart of compassion to be a provider, Cancer, a nourisher, a nurturer to the collective, 12th house.
Right.
It's also going to be your sensitivity to the collective would have been very dialed up and highlighted with the solar eclipse on your South Node. The creative gifts that you're bringing in, the emotional sensitivities that you've always had, all of that's going to be brought into a clear focus with that solar eclipse.
And to
but
put into
a nodal opposition, sometimes people really feel like they're moving backwards because there is an actual reliving of the past.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Because I could relate to that in a lot of the way to the experience that I had here at the house that I'm living, where it was a time where before I had started living here, again, I'd lived at my own place with my mother. And me and my mother, I had a deep desire to go and live at a new place, to be able to be with a bunch of people who are my people. And, that is essentially what happened when I came to the present house that I'm in. What I found is that I had a strong difficulty integrating with all of the people in this house because I had been living with my mother for most of my life, for all those years. And my mother took care of things for me. I would leave the counter a mess and my mom would come in and clean it up for me. And I used to just think it's okay. I'm studying yoga, so it's okay that my mom is cleaning up for me after me because I'm putting energy into the more important thing. I came in, that was a gross energy that I just had kind of held on to. When I started living at the house that I'm presently living at, I found that it was very frustrating for everybody, for them to hold the space for me to integrate as becoming an individual within a collective who doesn't have the privilege of everyone cleaning up after him. It was very embarrassing for me to have to instigate everybody to hold the space for that. And everyone, thankfully the people at my house are very compassionate, and they did, but to a point, because they have boundaries too. And if I left a bunch of crap out, I had to get told a lot to just try and pay more attention to what's going on with this community collective, and not just spin the old wheels that I've always been spinning in this sort of way. These
Now
kind
you
of
can see how that dynamic is certainly reflecting the 12th, 6th house axis.
I think
you
so.
all know how 12th house Pisces likes to drift around. And now we also notice, lo and behold, Saturn's transiting your north node.
I was noticing that too.
At the same time.
Very fascinating. I could
You're getting
totally
the
see
6th
that.
house critical feedback. The archetype is Virgo, that you need to get more organized, Capricorn.
Totally.
Grow up a little bit, Capricorn.
Yep. And it was painful.
Take charge of your life.
Because these people were
sure.
Cancer. I always saw this as being a Cancer opportunity, which is like, I'm finally going to come into a place where people understand me. And I finally get there, and I met Capricorn, and it's like, whoa, this isn't what I expected. But it was both, because these people that I'm living with are both. They are a reflection of both these axes, because they do love me and have compassion in the Cancer way. But like, they have their own Capricorn that they are integrating at the same time that I am. And so really both of those things are kind of coming through at this time through this experience.
Sure. And I would suspect there being an overall theme of boundaries.
Yes.
That's such a 12th, 6th house theme. Is 12th house is boundarylessness.
Right.
And then your soul is learning these 6th house themes of boundaries. So my guess is that it went, I mean, when we're living life, it's everything. It's not just one thing. So my guess is there also could have been some themes and or struggles around your own sensitivity to those that are around you.
Yes.
And how when you move to a new environment, Cancer, that's going to affect your own self-image, Cancer.
Totally.
So it's also going to be bringing up the North Nodal theme of Capricorn in 6th house, which is you're also learning to create boundaries for yourself, to create that container where all this messiness, which is also your creative genius, because let's not just put down that messiness, it's also a part of your genius. So it's like you're integrating that into a focus, into the boundaries, to create a container that also is important. So that way you don't get thrown around by the impressions of other people. So my guess is that it was probably a bit of both.
Yeah, nailed it. Absolutely, Timothy. And you're reading that perfectly, is that there was a combination of, how do I integrate myself into this new community while not throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Right. How do I retain?
That's always the notes.
Totally.
Exactly.
And there were so many conversations where we had simple things, the people that I'm living with, God bless them again, they're compassionate, but also true. And so many of the things that I was fighting for were just stupid things, like, again, leaving my dishes out. I'm the type of person who leaves my dishes out, and you're not. So how do we integrate that? And they would look at me and say, that's not how this is rolling. We are all here agreeing upon community statutes, and this is what we're all trying to abide by. We all have our individuality, but Dustin, I gotta cook, and you've got a bunch of crap here on the table. There are certain realities that Capricorn taught me that I had to let go of. But at the same time, I added like an artistic go with the flow consciousness at some level as well, where it's like, it's not that important that everything is that pristinely operated on all the time. I added a looseness, as well as also my looseness integrating the tightness, if that makes sense.
It does. And again, we see the Saturn Chiron opposition coming into effect. And that's the beauty of the chart, is everything's always happening. It's always going on. So Saturn's on your moon's north node while you're getting these Saturn, what's really, these Saturn reflections are bringing you into your north node intention. Hey, time to get this together, time to build this, time to figure this out, make it practical, make it structured. But again, that Saturn ruling that north node is in this opposition conversation with Chiron. And you're always going to have this conversation. It's something you're really working with and healing, where the opposition is a teeter-totter. So Saturn Aquarius says, well, we, the hive mind, as a community, we wash our dishes that way. Saturn in Aquarius.
Right.
And then Chiron in the 12th house, Leo, is, well, I do things in my own way. I've got my own rhythm. I've got my own voice. I've got my own creative flow. Leo in the 12th house.
Totally.
And what's so important is that when you're working with this polarity, it really is, and this is true for any opposition, is it's like the actual mechanism you're using is going to be this teeter-totter, listening to the community feedback, Saturn on the descendant in Aquarius. And that's going to trigger some reactions sometimes with that Chiron.
Yep.
And you're listening to those reactions as well.
Totally.
Because it's important. It's coming from your inner child. It's coming from your creative genius, and you're not throwing that one out either.
Totally.
You're creating a structure that's going to actually bridge that Chiron need to act on spontaneity, to be yourself, as Leo, to do it in your own way. And at the beat of the drum, spontaneous, to integrate a bridge between the community dynamic. That's what your soul actually wants. And it especially highlighted with Saturn ruling your moon's north node.
That's wonderful, Timothy. And that's exactly how it unfolded. It's amazing to see. And especially that, again, astrology through the eclipses is to the July. Like, I'm just so blown away. July was when I moved in. This is when this solar eclipse happened. Like, it's to the date. So this is just like an incredible thing for me, Timothy. And I hope everybody in my audience is watching this, and I'm sure everybody can see the correlations here, that, you know, this solar eclipse phenomenon is an incredible way for everybody to start to seeing in a lived experience in your Jivatman what is actually being picked up on in the evolutionary narrative of our integration of wholeness through the astrology chart that we each have. Now, Timothy, my friend, we've been chatting for a long time, and I think we've conveyed, I wanted to show everybody what is happening with the movement of the solar eclipses through the chart year by year, or whenever they happen. So this feels to me, Timothy, like we've really conveyed the importance of these eclipses. Is there anything else that you wanted to, that you want to rap about, or anything in regards to where we're at right now? Any final thoughts?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I mean, I get so excited just to be able to really go in depth with another soul that's taken the time to study and practice. And it's so amazing to hear someone who's also studying, because you can talk about, I had this experience, this eclipse is happening. If more people learned astrology, they would have such an increase of self-awareness and understanding of life. I don't even think people can begin to comprehend just how radical and mind-blowing it is to have this extra awareness. So again, I appreciate the opportunity. I'll do another plug that you can join my membership community, and I'll do exactly what I just shared with Dustin for you. And it's my favorite thing I do every month, because you cannot make this shit up. The archetypes are the archetypes. You see the timing, the planets line up, and oh my gosh, Saturn is doing Saturn. Chiron's doing Chiron. It's so easy and obvious once you really get to see it. And that's what you get to see through sharing personal experience compared with the transits or the astrology. So one thing I'll add just to summarize here is everybody who has not yet looked at solar eclipses in your chart, looked at the transiting moon's nodes in your chart, or certainly if you're not familiar with the moon's nodes, join my Astro School, because you're going to get so much information. Again, I was able to spit just a few things back to Dustin that's going to reflect his overall life experience, his childhood experience, relationship to mother, parents, job is all there in the moon's nodes.
Yeah, and you nailed it.
So it's crazy, because it really, this really is the life that we're living. We really are in these archetypal experiences to learn and grow, and nothing in life is an accident. We're meant to live the life that we are living. Absolutely. One of my favorite Jeffrey Green quotes, because he was a bit of a hard ass, he was a very Scorpio soul, he had a very challenging life, is he said, you don't have to like your life, you just have to do it, you just have to accept it. And that's what astrology can do, is it can be a truly helpful tool to guide us into accepting the life that we're living. And boy, that can make life easier if we can accept
Yeah.
what it is
If you
that we are
can,
working with.
if you can treat it with equanimity, that's one of the key lines in one of my favorite books is called the Bhagavad Gita. And
Oh, yeah.
basically the main whole shtick there that it says is that if you can abide by your dharma, your duty, whatever is given in your chart, without attachments to what your preconceived mental notions of good and bad are, then you will be just doing. And what that final line, it's from chapter 2, what it says is that truly mental poise is true yoga. If you can be in a state of mental poise, treating your reactions to circumstances objectively, then you can just do your dharma. And that is the, by being immersed in astrology, we can see when we might be spinning a little bit too hard on any incidental condition that's happening as a transit or a solar eclipse or what have you, so that we can put it in context.
Absolutely. It's like everything is this expansion, contraction, sunrise, sunfall, seasonal progression. So if we can tune into the actual rhythms of life, which we can, and astrology helps, we can anticipate, okay, a summertime or a winter time is coming, and I will generally, and even with practice, tune in and automatically dress more appropriately for summer or winter. That doesn't mean that we're having a mental crisis or breakdown that summer or winter is happening. It's just seasons. It's not good or bad.
Wow.
Same with the various experiences we have in our life. We're not meant to have, and this is honestly one of the number one things I'm working with clients all the time, is deconditioning this notion that if you do enough yoga or spiritually practice enough, your life's going to get clear and just like fall together, as if that's how life works. It is not how life works. We're meant to have challenging experiences. And if we can embrace that, we can even learn that those challenging experiences are working with and for us. So I also love the Gita, and I agree. This is one of the truths, the overall, you could say, esoteric, magical truths of astrology. What an astrologer is actually doing is becoming one with the forces of life, that is nature. How to tune in with those forces, understand them, so that way we can tune in with them. So where this journey begins with, thank you, it's the journey of the zodiac, reflects this progression that we begin in Aries, and we're just excited and we're exploring and we're discovering things and desiring things and living life. And then we individuate, we discover, I'm born into a consciousness that's different than other people born into their consciousness. Totally. When we come into our, you could say, completion or perfection, but again, it's not ever truly looking like that, because it's always ongoing, is when we become conscious of our individual nature, to recognize the gifts that we're born with, that we have, that we're capable of, and then we offer those gifts back to the collective. That is the progression of the zodiac, is the individual becoming self-aware, and then connecting to the species, the collective, through an awareness of the entire species. There is an interconnectivity that's there. We can use astrology to validate that journey, that this struggle is meant to come into your individual nature, where you will discover these gifts that can come full circle into your potential gift back to the world. Wow. So that's what the bottom line is. That's how we can use any reading, any chart, kind of revolves around that fundamental truth.
That is so wonderful, Timothy. So I love that you are doing what you're doing in your community. And I'd love to say at this moment, we should give the plug for your community, because I totally get it. I totally love that how and why you're doing it. I think it's amazing that you're keeping, all of us astrologers are doing this thing where we're keeping our knowledge sharp, where we're studying astrology. You are not only studying astrology for yourself, but you're also educating astrology for others. And the third aspect is that you're healing through this community. So the community website is called rasalilacommunity.com. Is that correct? That's
right. Thank you so much, Dustin. I appreciate
it's an amazing thing what you're doing, buddy.
Thank you, because I have worked with and experienced other of the big famous astrologers. And I will tell you, no matter how sharp your astrological skill or practice is, if you have no therapeutic skill, and if you don't truly care about helping people, it does not matter at all. You can spend your whole life becoming a knower of everything, and it means nothing if you cannot do something with it. So that's astrology, is we want to validate what we're working with and then point people to how they can actually use it. So thank you so much. I would love to have more folks in the community. It is free to join. There's also membership options, but the intention is to bring together people who are working with these tools to actually create something that's helpful at healing. Yeah, I'll just quickly summarize that again.
Feel free.
Those who are new to eclipses, again, just having a sense of the moon's nodes, what house is the south node transiting, what house is the north node transiting. It's roughly 1.5 years that the moon's nodes goes through each zodiac polarity, more or less, depending on the sizes of houses. And pay attention to eclipses as they connect with your natal chart. Pay attention to the house that eclipse falls in your natal chart and the planetary aspects to the rest of the planets in your chart, because that's especially what's going to be highlighted. It's like the universe is focusing on that part of our life, our chart, and that's again going to bring a lot of the focus and the intention for that entire 6-month eclipse period.
Right, of course. And it's really something that we're probably going to be integrating. All the aspects to the solar eclipse point is something that we'll be integrating throughout basically until the next solar eclipse. Is that your...
Yes.
That's how you would reckon it. Yeah, that totally makes sense to me, Timothy. Wonderful.
Awesome.
So do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to add before we end our transmission today?
I feel great. This feels like a wonderful completing point. And again, it's been a really enjoyable conversation. And I would love to talk more with you about astrology, or, talk about life, spirituality, psychedelics, whatever it may be. Very happy to be having this conversation with you. Absolutely.
That sounds great, Timothy. I have lots of ideas to hang out with you. We could talk about Jeffrey Wolf Green's chart. We could talk about all the things. So I'm going to stay in touch with you, Timothy. For everybody watching, I'm Dustin Cormier, and this is Howtorockastrology. This has been us hanging out with Timothy Halloran from RasaLilaHealing.com. Thanks for everybody watching, and thanks for hanging out with me, Tim, buddy.
Thanks so much, Dustin.
It's been a real pleasure, and I'll see you guys on the flip side in the next episode that we decide to do together. Take care.